Too small to stand behind the mic, stand clearly. Right, okay, so hopefully, eventually something should come up on the screens. So there should hopefully be one slide before then, maybe not. There should be, so we shall see. Maybe there is. I've got a little clicker thing as well, which is going to move stuff across. We'll see if that actually works. My work gave me for lecturing a little remote to use. That kind of stuff for lecturing. Never once used it for lecturing. I use it here, which is good. So it's good to get free stuff from work. No, it is going to work. I don't want that yet. It's gone too far. This is a bad thing. Right. Before we start, we're going to read. Just going to read the stuff. The kids are going to go out. I'm right. That's right. That's Steve's job. That's definitely not my job. Yeah, kids can get out. That's fine. So if you're a kid or just want to leave, you're welcome. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be reading from Matthew chapter 21. Unsurprisingly, it being Palm Sunday, we're going to read a couple of verses about Palm Sunday and Jesus' entry and that kind of stuff. So Matthew 21, verses 1 to 11. We're going to start with that. So it starts with now when they drew near to Jerusalem and came to Bethphage to the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village in front of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, you shall say, 'The Lord needs them,' and he will send them at once." This took place to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet, saying, "Say to the daughter of Zion, Behold, your king is coming to you, humbled and mounted on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden." The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put on them their cloaks, and he sat on them. Most of the crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. And the crowds that went before him and that followed him were shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest!" And when he entered into Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred up, saying, "Who is this?" And the crowd said, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee." Okay, so Palm Sunday, a while ago Lucas was going to be away. They all said this. They said, "All right, will you do Palm Sunday?" And I was kind of thinking, not really. There's nothing in me that wanted to particularly. I had a few ideas. I was thinking Lucas eventually is going to ask me to speak on something, and I had some kind of stuff planned for different topics. None of them were fitting in Palm Sunday. So I was kind of thinking, well, thanks for that, Lucas. It's not really what I wanted to do. You could move your holiday. You decided that wasn't going to happen. So selfish. The good thing is, kind of one of the songs that Pete brought, the Amazing Grace song before, there's a kind of bridge in there where the guy kind of just sings over and over again, what kind of king leaves his throne? What kind of king leaves his throne? And as I kind of reflected on that, as I was thinking of Palm Sunday, this kind of theory, what kind of king is this? I realised that God was kind of really speaking that into me and kind of getting me ready for that. So that's what we're going to see. Can we go back a couple of slides? Is that possible, Mark? I don't know if I've messed this up. So that might be the first one or not. But we're looking at what kind of king is this. Now we're going to start with the fact that, as we'll see in this kind of story, as we're going to unpack the fact that this wasn't the king that anybody expected. And we're going to look at really actually 3 things. That he's not the king that they wanted, he's not the king that they thought they deserved, but he's ultimately the king that we all needed. And things don't always turn out the way that we expect. Now that picture there, there's one person in the room from Grimsby, which is rare when I speak. But that picture there is a lovely place called Pleasure Island. Now that is a theme park in Grimsby. It's a beautiful place, is it not? Yeah, okay, it's as nice as it looks. I deliberately found quite a bad picture. Because when I was 16, I got my kind of first ever kind of job, summer job when I was at college. And I thought, right, of all the summer jobs that can go in Grimsby, you either kind of work in a factory shelling peas or filleting fish, or you can work at a theme park. And I thought theme park sounds better. You're outside, it's warm, and you get to speak to people, and it'll be fun, and everyone's going to be happy. And then maybe when the park shuts, you'll get to go on all the rides. Didn't turn out like that. Okay, I turned up to this place. A lot of the time it was like this. It was cold. It was grey. It was 6 days a week. I had to get on the 7:30 bus. I wouldn't get back till 7:30, which may not feel like, well, when you're 16, it's your first job. All of a sudden, it's pretty rubbish. Okay, and over that year, what I have, if you've got the next one, this remote's not going to work, is it? So I'll give one we've got there, we'll go through a combination of all the rides that I had to operate for the summer. Now that first one seems nice enough. Oh, it's a wagon wheel, what a nice thing with loads of families. Now that's fine if it didn't have in two of those a family of birds nested. So you're not allowed to open those, so we had to kind of rope those off. No families can use those because birds might come out, pet their eyes out and all that kind of stuff. But also every morning, because there were two families of birds, they would just create mess everywhere. And so the first job, I'd get a mop, I'd be getting a bucket, and it would just be wheeling it around, oh, there's bird poo all over that one, mop, bucket. Next one, oh, there's loads of bird poo, mop, bucket. What a lovely start to a day. Just kind of clearing that kind of stuff out. And that was one of the nicer ones. We got the next one. Slightly worse than the Ferris wheel. Every now and then I've got the razzle dazzle, and every day it's like a lottery. You turn up and they'd be like, what ride have you got? And pretty much all of them were rubbish. And so this one is one that just spins round and then it's kind of like slopes up like a kind of Mexican hat thing, so it slopes up and then down. And obviously, if you're on that ride, you're going to be cleaning up sick at some point. There's no way around that. You're cleaning up sick. Okay, the only thing you don't want to do is you don't want to be cleaning up sick on that last ride of the day. If you can clean up sick during the day, that gives you a break. And that's absolutely fine. I don't mind that. Whereas, what you're running the ride at 5:30, last one, you're thinking this ride is running for 20 seconds, I'm going to press stop, we're getting off, we're going on. I am not doing this, and then, so I did this last ride, kind of all good, all nice. I see one guy going a little bit queasy. I was like, get that down now, stop, button comes down, the kind of rises up, go away with it, good. Let everybody off, kind of everybody leaves, and as I'm doing my little checks, there's just this monster, like just pile, right in the corner in the footwell. And I'm like, why? Just why? It's just like some kind of secret sly vomiter, and some kind of like spy vomiting in the corner, so there I missed my bus home because there I'm cleaning up sick. It's lovely stuff. The next one, that we've got, that is the Tinkerboo Water Factory, which is probably a nice one for a family ride, but it's got a song that's 90 seconds long, which will play in your head until the day you die. And so, like, it's got a lyric in there like, sugar, sweets and toffees a treat, lots of lovely things to eat in the Tinkerboo Factory. I've worked there for nearly 11 years, and that's still there. And so that, you come out at the end of the day just not wanting to hear anything in the world, just really just smacking yourself in the head, stuff like that. There's another one. That's the best one that you can get on. And the only reason that's the best one you can get on is it's one of these that kind of take people up in like a hot air balloon basket, but then they get to the top and they kind of get a good view and then it kind of drops them relatively quick. Now the good thing is, because that's quite high up, when it's windy you're not allowed to run that ride. That's the best ride in the world, because half the time you're shut, because Grimsby's on the coast and it's not got good weather. So I'll be like, oh yes, I'm on the Para Tower. That's amazing, I'm not going to do any work. And so you go in, check the wind gauge, oh no, we're shut, oops. And stuff like that. Otherwise, it kind of blew off the sensors and the baskets got stuck up there, which happened a few times. Now that's a proper ride. People really do, they think you're joking, like you're keeping them up there for a while, and then a minute later, like, you're not joking, are you? We're stuck. Oh no, it was the worst thing that's ever happened. So that was the best one. But every now and then you get that one. But it wasn't quite as I expected. And so, as we'll see in the Palm Sunday, Jesus is not the king that these guys expected. But unlike this situation where I expected something going to be amazing and it was massively a disappointment, it was horrible, Jesus is way more than they were expecting, but in a very different way than maybe they were expecting to happen. So as we look at this, we're going to look at the kind of final week of Jesus' life. We're going to look at a couple of things that happened because kind of Palm Sunday happens, and we know obviously Easter's coming up this week. Now if we read the kind of all the kind of Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, we're going to look at the ones there that are kind of quite similar about their accounts of this. Now John, when he kind of talks about the triumphal entry, that's actually John chapter 12. Now there are 21 chapters in John, which means there are 9 chapters on 1 week of Jesus' life. That final week, as what is a big week, it's an important week. We need to kind of really get our heads around kind of what happens that week, what Jesus says, what he does, because if you can kind of dedicate nearly half the gospel to 1 week, there's obviously a lot going on that's kind of worthwhile. So definitely worth, probably this last week, it's worth reading through John, I would say, because that's going to be something that contains quite a lot in there. So we're going to look at this, and we're going to look at what kind of king is this. So we're going to see, and if we flick over to the first one there, Mark, the first thing we're going to see is it's not the king that they deserved. Okay, and I mean deserved in terms of what they think they deserve. Now, Jewish people were being oppressed at this time, they were under Roman rule, but they're used to kind of that. That's happened in the Old Testament, that's happened before, where they've been in this cycle where people were oppressing them, they cry out to God, God raises up kind of a warrior king or judge or whatever, they free the people, they take them into freedom, but But the problem with that is, then that judge or king dies. And as that judge or king dies, the people then forget about God and they slip back. And then they start this cycle again. And they kind of turn away from God, they do anything else, they end up in trouble, they cry out to God, somebody else comes in. Okay? And that cycle goes through a lot of the Old Testament. You'll see a good king, followed by a bad king, followed by a bad king, then a good king, and then maybe another good king, but it doesn't last. Okay, and God knows this, and so as Jesus comes in, the people are thinking, wow, this is the guy who's coming to save us. The word that they say, Hosanna, is kind of save us or salvation, so they're saying, we're going to get saved, and they're kind of thinking, right, we're fed up with this oppression, we're going to get led into freedom, this is the guy that's going to take us out from underneath the Romans, he's going to lead a rebellion. And of course we know that Jesus does bring salvation, but not in the way that they think that they deserve and they're expecting. Because they're used to, well, we want a warrior. That's the deal, God. That's what you've always given us. We want one of these. Okay, but as we're going to see, that Jesus isn't going to fit their model of what the king that they want. He's not going to come in with a sword. He's not going to come in to take down the armies. Okay, because Jesus is coming for a very different thing. And as we'll see, the whole problem, as we said, with this cycle is that when a king dies, the nations slip back. And what we need is we need a king who's not going to die. Okay, and what we're going to see with Jesus is we need a king that will beat death, so that when this king is no longer around, is no longer physically there leading the people, something will carry on. Okay, and we're going to see that Jesus is going to fit that model. The second thing that we're going to look at is it's not the king that they wanted. Okay, so in the same way that he's not this warrior king, he's riding a donkey, he's not coming in this kind of big power move. As we see, if we look in Matthew, Mark and Luke, all three of those versions go straight from Jesus entering onto a donkey to Jesus trashing the temple. It's quite an unusual kind of thing. You think, right, well, isn't Palm Sunday, it's all about the kind of nice scene with everybody waving the branches and all the smiley faces. But then Jesus goes into the temple. We don't really think about Jesus. We don't really think about the angry Jesus or anything much. We've got a couple of pictures that come after this. I realise that was quite small, but there's another one after that. Jesus kind of trashing the temple. We don't think about Jesus getting angry that often. We don't think about Jesus being kind of frustrated or annoyed or angry. We tend to think of, look, one more picture, we tend to think of, that's Jesus, isn't he? Nice calm Jesus holding lambs. That's what we do. And so we tend to get a bit more comfortable with this. Jesus coming to bring peace, and of course he comes to bring peace. But we kind of do that, and we kind of skip over the fact that Jesus has a very real kind of anger at this point, a very real annoyance. So if you flick off, I can't keep that picture on, so thank you. And so what we're going to see is that Jesus here isn't just a little bit annoyed. Like I lecture accountancy, which is a cool job. Imagine how cool that is. And so I do that. And when I was at uni, I lived in a house of 5 accountants. Just imagine the parties that we went to. We never get back to any parties. And so I kind of lived there, and we moved in, and it was a horrible thing. You know, like uni houses, you know, they're always dirty, but we really picked the cheapest for the cheap. You look back and you kind of think, and I'm talking to Josh about to go to uni now, we kind of, in my second or third year, we kind of said, right, we need to go for the cheapest one, which was at that time 45 quid a week. Now, we knew some mates who were paying 50 quid a week, and we thought they were millionaires at that time, but £5 more a week? What, you paid with gold? And so, but the problem was they could obviously live in a house which didn't have slugs, and didn't have just like disease just festering everywhere. And so then, you know, you got to weigh up. And we went in there, and they had this kind of 1970s carpet. It was just terrible. And we had kind of 2 housemates that we sent to do all the practical jobs. One was kind of the southern housemate from near London, who was sensible. He was sent to make decisions and talk to people. And we had a Geordie housemate. He was sent there to carry the things. You've got to stick to your rule, okay? So, 6-foot Geordie fella, you are there to lift. You do nothing else. You don't negotiate. There's a reason that no Geordies ever win The Apprentice. They're not going to negotiate. It's the southerner. He's going in to do that. And so we send them off to get us a new carpet. And so they do that. They come back. They say, we've got a good deal on the carpet. It's 40 quid. Now, 40 quid for a lounge carpet is too cheap. And so straight away we're like, right, that's £8 each. What on earth have you done to get us a carpet? Who have you stolen that from? And they said, well, they wanted to charge us to lay the carpet. Of course they wanted to charge us to lay the carpet. How is it going to get laid? And there's where the Geordie fellow stepped in. He said, well, that was a rip-off, wasn't it? And so we decided we were going to lay our own carpet. What? And he was like, my dad lays his carpet all the time, but Dad does not. Your dad's a director of a company. He does not lay his own carpet all the time. So we said, well, we've got it here. So they brought it in, and we're like, right, what on earth are we doing? So we all pulled our cumulative tools, and as 5 accountants, you can imagine how useful we are at practical things. So we pulled those, one of us had a Stanley knife, One of us had a set square. That's it. That's it. We're now ready to lay a carpet, apparently. So what then followed for about 4 hours was kind of 4 people laying on the carpet like starfish, in corners, getting it straight, somebody cutting it with a Stanley knife. It was ripped, it was torn. We got it into some kind of shape and we're like, I don't know, if we get the other carpet up. And someone went, do you know what, should we just glue it? And so someone went out and bought some glue, and we just glued it, and we just threw it on top of the other carpet, jumped on it a little bit, stamped it down. Landlord came round, and within 1 day we lost our damage deposit. He came round and was like, what have you done to my house? You have come in within a day and you've ruined my house. And it was a bad house anyway, and we made it worse. And then the carpet started to tear, and you could see the old carpet through the carpet. It was not impressive. And so that's what happened. So we kind of lay this carpet, he comes around, he gets annoyed. Now, in a sense, we kind of think, at best, when we think of Jesus getting angry, we think he gets a bit annoyed. Almost like Jesus has come in and gone, oh, this is the temple, it's my house, oh, what have you done? And Jesus is not just annoyed. In John's version of this, Jesus actually kind of makes a whip. Okay, we don't really think about that often. Jesus makes a whip and he goes after people. Now, because I'm a child, in my kind of Bible, I've got, next to that bit, I've just written, go on, son. Next to that bit, like the kind of angry Jesus who's really fuming. And we'll see that this kind of Jesus is the guy who will happily, in a few chapters' time, wash the feet of Judas, the guy who's going to betray him. He's not a guy who just flies off the handle. He washes the feet of the guy who's going to betray him. So he's got that level of kind of forgiveness and grace. But there's something in this temple that gets him so angry that he just thinks, I can't handle this, I can't deal with this, I need to sort this out. Okay, and what would happen is these guys putting these tables in the outer courts where the Gentiles and the women and the slaves, they could all come and they could hear about God, they could be taught about God. But they couldn't get there because all these people had built all their stalls to sell stuff, to make money, so that they could kind of get more wealth and they could have their own kind of power and position and that kind of stuff. And the very kind of place that these people could come at the time of Passover, where there's a lot of people there and people who want to hear about God, and Jesus is saying, what have you done to my house? It's not just you've ruined it, it doesn't look as nice. You have turned my house into something it was never meant to be. It was never meant to be about your position and your power and your wealth. It was meant to be about people connecting with God. And he comes in and he turns that over, he throws the tables over. And what we're going to see with Jesus, he doesn't fit any kind of the models that they want. Now when I was a kid, we used to play football at school. At break time, we used to play this game called World Cup Singles. Played it with the lads on Thursday here, where everybody, say you've got 6 people, every man's for themselves, you've got 1 goalkeeper, everybody's shooting at the same goal. If you score a goal, you go through. Okay, until there's only 2 left. Whoever doesn't score a goal, they're out. Okay, and this guy wasn't very good at football, called Harris, so he was out first round. So the rest of us then carry on, go back in. Well, that means he's now got to wait for 20 minutes, just sitting there. It's quite cold, because we live in Grimsby. And so therefore he decides to put his coat on. And then he thinks it'd be funny to put somebody else's coat on. And then somebody else's coat. And we just layer him up. To the point where he's got about kind of 10 coats on, with the biggest lad obviously on top. So he's kind of walking around, he can't move his arms or anything like that. And we all think this is quite funny. Until another guy goes out, and then gets a little bit annoyed and pushes Harris over as a kind of a joke. But he's padded, so he's fine, because he's got 10 coats on, so he just kind of lands. The problem with that is he can't move his hands, he can't do his coats, he can't get up. So he just rolls around, his head is full, unable to kind of move, get up. I'm like, good friends, the bell goes, so of course we leave him. And so we just leave him, and so we get into lesson, he's in trouble. Like, where's Harris? Oh, I don't know where Harris has gone. I don't know. And then someone sees him in a tennis court, one of the teachers, they have to go and take all these coats off him. So we get in a little bit of trouble, definitely worth it. So he kind of then, for the next couple of weeks, we kind of all kind of, we have to make it up to him, fair enough. And the thing is, with Jesus, all these people at these times are trying to put these different coats on. Like, when they come in they think, right, we want you to be the warrior king. Well, now, actually, we want you to kind of be the head of the temple, actually. Maybe kind of just teach us and be part of that and help us get this kind of power and show how good we are. And as everybody's trying to kind of create this kind of role for Jesus, Jesus said, you can't put coats on me, because I'm not going to fit what you want me to be as a king. I'm a king beyond what any of you will understand. I'm a king beyond what any of you will know. And he's going to throw those coats off to risk his reputation to hang out with people that he shouldn't be hanging out with. Because the Jewish leaders were thinking he's hanging out with women, he's hanging out with tax collectors, he's hanging around with people he shouldn't be hanging around with. Jesus risks his reputation because he knows that what he's doing is way more important than what people think of him, way more important than the kind of roles that people want to put him in. The third thing we've got is the king that they need. Okay, what kind of king hangs on a cross? So certainly the thing they didn't expect at this point. They're kind of looking at a warrior king, looking at a king who's going to rescue them, and then a week later, or less than a week later, this is the king that they're all shouting, crucify him. This king that they all welcome in and say, maybe he'll lead us in a revolution. This is the king that kind of hangs on a cross, naked. This is the king that they spit at. And Jesus knows as he comes in that this is going to happen. Jesus knows that this is always going to be the case. This is the whole kind of reason that he's come. He's not shocked at this. And then, again, as we look at the kind of triumphal entry, we have a story of Jesus coming on a donkey. Then he trashes the temple. And then another story again in Matthew, Mark and Luke that he talks about is the parable of the tenants. Which again is quite a weird kind of thing to put in there, because he talks about this tenant where this man builds a vineyard and he lets people rent this vineyard. And then when it comes to the time to get the fruit, he sends some servants. But the tenants kill those servants, so he sends some more. And they kill some more. And eventually he sends the son. And then they kill the son. And he tells this story to the crowd at this point. And they're probably not going to get it. But Jesus knows as he comes in, at this very point where they're all celebrating him, Jesus knows that he's coming in to die. He knows that his time is up. He knows that he's coming to the point where he's going to give his life. And people still don't get it. They're kind of shouting, save us, you're the king. And they've got this king in front of them. They don't really know who he is. And it says in this passage that the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Okay, and so we will see that Jesus obviously always knew that this was going to be the plan. He knew as he rides in, he knows what he's doing, he knows where that's leading him, because a guy called Leonard Sweet, we kind of listened, we went to him at a staff conference at YFC in January. He kind of talked about some stuff about this kind of Palm Sunday thing, and he said that the guys in Bethlehem around Passover, they're the guys that produce the kind of lambs, that they breed the lambs. And he said what they did was they breed the lambs, but the lambs for the sacrifice in the temple, they've got to be unblemished, they've got to be undamaged. So he said what they did is they breed these lambs, and to look after these lambs, because lambs have got kind of spindly little legs, and they'll run into trouble, or bang into each other. If they get bruised or broken legs, they're useless, he said. So what they do in their very infancy, they wrap them up, they put them in a manger to keep them safe, so they're not going to get damaged until they're strong enough, until they're able to do it. And then a few days before Passover, they'll take them all in, they'll do this kind of thing called the processional lambs, where they run them all into Jerusalem, where all these lambs come in for sacrifice. And so Jesus, this king who's born in Bethlehem, who's laid in a manger, he knows is at this point that he's coming into there as the lamb. He's going in to give his life. He's not going in to take the plaudits of the crowd. He's going in to die. He's going in knowing that this is hanging over him. And he doesn't kind of shout, or all these people are kind of shouting him, and he knows they don't get it. He knows the same crowd are going to be baying for his blood. He doesn't go there about how much of a hypocrites they are. He spends this kind of week just trying to teach us about the kingdom of God, and trying to explain to us this story that we still probably struggle to grasp, the story that we still don't really get fully who Jesus is, and we'll probably still be working out for all of our lives exactly what it means to follow Jesus, exactly who this kind of king is, with all these kind of complexities. But what we do see is that small group of people who've been with him for 3 years, who start to kind of see that it's making sense. They still, as Jesus gives his life, they still don't get it. But what we're going to see is that Easter Sunday is going to come. And as Easter Sunday comes, they start to click on, and they start to get what Jesus is all about. They start to get it as he raises from the dead, and he comes back to life, and then they wait for the Holy Spirit, and the church forms. This group of people who still didn't get it the whole time, all of a sudden, they're going to really understand what it means to follow Jesus. And we've got this quote up here. There's a quote from a guy called Donald Miller, and he says, earthly love is temporal and slight, so it has to be given again and again for us to feel any sense of security. But God's love, God's voice and presence, would instill our souls with such affirmation that we would need nothing more, and would cause us to love other people so much that we would be willing to die for them. Perhaps this is what the apostles stumbled upon. Okay, so as all these people don't get this king, eventually it is this small group of believers that really start to understand exactly what it is about Jesus. And there's this kind of story that it's kind of an older story, kind of almost like a parable really, about a dad and a son, and the mum dies at a young age, and the dad and the son become very close, and they collect fine art together, and they kind of build up this great collection of kind of Picasso, Van Goghs, all that kind of stuff. And then the son goes off and he fights in a war, and then the son ends up kind of getting in with all the kind of soldiers, and he ends up dying in battle with one of the soldiers, and he gets a letter telling him that his son's died. And so this guy is obviously heartbroken as he's old, he's alone, he's left with all this art and the memories of his son and that kind of stuff. And one day this guy turns up to his house, and he just says, look, I've tried to come earlier, but I was away, but now I'm back, and I just want to say that your son served with me in the war. He was a great man, he was a really generous guy. I just wanted to know, I drew this picture of him. It's not a great picture, but I sketched a little bit, and I've got this picture of him. It's just a pencil drawing, it's a bit rough. But I think it's right that you should have it. And so he gives this drawing to this guy, and the guy obviously kind of frames it, puts it in a private place in his house. And then this guy dies, and because his son's died, there is no one to leave anything to in a will. And so all his paintings go up to auction, and they auction all his paintings, and loads of people come from all over because of all these valuable paintings and stuff like this, and everybody's interested. All these people are thinking, right, all the good stuff's coming. He says, right, the first lot is his pencil drawing of his son. And no one's bothered, okay? He says, right, we'll start the bidding at 100 quid. No one's interested. And he drops the price, and he drops the price, and he drops the price. So someone said, look, get rid of this and get onto the good stuff. And the auctioneer says, no, I need to sell this first, that's the rules. I've got to sell this one first. And eventually, just some kind of old guy who's a neighbour pipes up and pays like 10 quid and gets his painting and takes it home. And the guy says, that's it, it's the end of the auction. And all the people are kicking off, going, what do you mean it's the end of the auction, we've come here for these paintings? And he says, well, I'm afraid the will of the actual old man who died says, whoever gets the son gets everything. And so at that point, these disciples, these people who don't quite always get it, they got that if we really grasp who Jesus is, whoever follows Jesus has everything. They realise it doesn't fit our model of warrior king, doesn't fit our model of kind of head knowledge in the temple. He is the king, and if we got Jesus, we've got everything. And as soon as they get that, they become this church like nothing that we've ever seen before. This cycle of a group of God's people who turn away and then need God to raise up a Redeemer is broken as these group of people who really know what it is to follow Jesus. As they come into the world, just tell them about the greatness of a king who would come and die for them. It transforms the world and transforms that city. And if we finish, we've got just a couple of points for us to finish on, really, just for us to think about really over Easter. And so, really just sticking with that theme of Jesus being the king that they never wanted, the king that they never really felt they deserved, and the king that they ultimately needed. So we think about these 3 points. The first thing we think about is Jesus the king that we want? Now, an obvious answer is we can all go, of course Jesus is the king that we want. But as I was thinking about that this week and thinking, is Jesus really the king that we want? In so many ways, Jesus is not the king that I want because it's hard. Because Jesus has phrases like, if you lay down your life and if you lose your life, then you will gain it eventually. If you would pick up your cross and follow me. Jesus calls me out to a much greater way. And to be honest, I'm currently living. He calls me to a much more sacrificial way. He calls me to a much more difficult way. Because he knows that if he can tear us away from these things that we expect and we judge success by, about how well we can do at work and how much stuff we can get, and how much people will like us, and how much we can get respect, if he can tear us away from that, then we will truly find life. I believe that when he says that you will find life and life in all its fullness, he's not talking about all the stuff that we can have. He's saying that if you can grasp this and get hold of that he who has the Son has everything, then that will transform our lives. So as Jesus kind of comes, I just think he is the king that I want. I tell you what, for him to be the king that I want and really treat him as the king, goodness, it's going to keep transforming my life over and over and over again to the point where when I think that everything's settled and I've got it all, you will challenge me again and you will challenge me again until the day that we go home. There's a great quote from a guy called Jamie Twakowski which says, we're called to be lovers bold in broken places, pouring ourselves out over and over again until we come home. And that's what it means to be a follower of Jesus. You may not get all the nicest stuff, but I tell you what, I want to live that calling now. I might be poured out over and over again in a broken world until we're called home. And that's the challenge that comes from this king. There's another quote that's coming up on the screen there, that radical obedience to Christ is not easy. It's not comfort, not health, not wealth, not prosperity in this world. It risks losing all these things. But in the end, such risk finds its reward in Christ. And he is more than enough for us. Okay, so if that's the king that we want, he needs to be more than enough. The second thing that we need to ask ourselves, which he's the king, or we need to think about, he's obviously the king that we will never deserve. What kind of king gives his life? What kind of king kind of puts himself out there for kind of nobody people? Okay, when we think of kingdoms, things like that, we kind of normally think, if you watch any kind of old, kind of Braveheart style films, either your king is kind of leading in terms of the battle, but often the kings will be sat at the back kind of directing things but being protected. Because if your king dies, well, then the battle's lost. Okay, and so therefore, you need to protect your king. And you'd have an army of ordinary people going in there, just protecting the king, laying down their life, that the king would be protected. Okay, and Jesus flips it on its head, and he lays down his life, that an army of ordinary people would one day be called home, and he would welcome them home, and he would call just a broken people, he would call them his people, and he would call us to be his. So he's the king that we will never deserve. And finally, what we've got there, the third one, I'm assuming I've got a third one there. There is a third one. He's a king that we will always need. Okay, so whenever I've had enough of church and kind of just people generally, it's never normally kind of God, it's normally just people and frustrations that come with that. Whenever I've really struggled, there have been times in my life where I remember just kind of going for a drive, sitting, just looking out in the middle of nowhere, or I remember sitting on the floor of a hotel room and had enough. Whenever I circle back to Jesus, I know that he's all I'm going to need, and he's all that I will ever have, because he's a king who doesn't die. He's a king who will never put on just my coat. He will never just be what I want him to be. He will be so much greater than I expect. And he's the king that I would always want to be trying to live my life for. So when we come back to it, church will never be enough. Other people will never quite be enough. We've got to have this point where we've just really got to come before Jesus and just read about him and just spend that time in intimacy with him and just think he is a king that we'll always need. And I just want to finish with a point that a guy said recently, that Jesus is the king, not like the Queen is the Queen at the moment. The Queen is great. I like the Queen. She's alright. But we wheel the Queen out for special occasions. We let her speak every now and then. She can do a little speech. We think, oh, isn't she nice? Well, Jesus isn't a king like that. We don't wheel him out at Easter and at Christmas. We don't kind of wheel him out when we feel that, he can suit our agenda. Jesus is the king. That means we need to let him speak into our life daily. And if we really serve the king, well, then he's authority over us. And that means he has authority over what we do with our time, what we do with our lives. He's not just a figurehead that we just have every now and then as a nicety. If Jesus is the king, he's got to be the king. Okay, and so as we get into Easter week, actually Pete's going to come up and finish. He's going to play some kind of song for us. So I'm just going to pray as Pete does that as we just spend this week on Easter, we really just reflect on what that kind of stuff really means. So God, as we get into this week, where you willingly lay down your life, knowing what you would go through, knowing what it would take, Lord, we just pray that this week we really just have that greater sense of you as King of our lives. Lord, this King that may be tough to follow. Lord, this King that we know we don't deserve. This King that we will always need. This King that if we have you, we have everything. And God, I just pray that in our lives this week we really just determine and try to keep that phrase in our minds, that we would know that if we have you, we have it all. So help us with that, we pray, Lord. When busyness, distractions, when life seems to try and get in the way, God, would you help us to find you in the midst of it all and just to lay down our lives at your feet again. Just pray that in your name.